Welcome to the fourth in our series entitled A Seminar on Self, presented by Tristan McGough, yours truly, philosopher at large. Having surveyed the fruits of self-transformation as well as the process and the path of self-transformation in our previous sessions, we're going to consider the obstacles to self-transformation today. Now, an obstacle is anything that hinders, diverts, or halts progress. You'll notice that this standard dictionary definition of what an obstacle is presumes the notion of progress. It's what an obstacle thwarts. For us, the notion of progress is embedded in the ninth dimension of self, the advancing self, which is the self ever transitioning from the experience past into the to-be-experienced future by way of and through experiencing the present. Since the advancing self actually, unerringly, and invariably passes through the eye of the needle present to become the future, the advancing self is also called the presenting self. This is the self wherein the real work of self-transformation gets done. Because this is where accumulate the mental products of what philosophers call imminent activity, where effects achieved, in this case the mental product itself, accrues to the same subject having caused it. In other words, it's internal causation. Professor Donsil gives a precise and concise definition in his book Philosophical Psychology, stating, "An imminent activity is one whose effects remain with the subject which acts." Consequently, whatever you as an agent cause in your consciousness will have its results there. That's true for whether you operate as a silent watcher or a dynamic actor. For a moment, look at your private container of consciousness wherein your imminent activity occurs as a crucible for self-change. You mix your ever-varying concoctions of thoughts, feelings, intentions, and actions within your own cauldron of consciousness. In alchemy, reference to this personal crucible of self-consciousness was hidden behind the gloss of an alembic, which is a large mixing beaker, an apparatus used in the transmutation of base metals into gold, which itself is a glyph for self-transformations from states of consciousness that bind to states of consciousness that liberate, those that yield the 5 fruits of self-transformation, which are an enlightening mind, an empowering will, an endearing heart, and an emancipating life, all unified as 4 into happiness, or as the ancient Greeks called it, eudaimonia. Now, eudaimonia literally means good spirit. Imaginatively conceived by the social self as a bliss-bestowing deity who overshadows and inspires its human possessor, allowing her or him to achieve a state of internal serenity, harmony, and felicity, a condition of mental well-being that the Bible calls the peace that surpasses understanding. This is the gold of the alchemy. Without opportunity for change, no transformation, self or otherwise, is possible. But what is an opportunity? Let's see what the dictionary says. But first, a note on the origin of linguistic symbols. A study of the etymological underpinnings of words is very important when garnering a deepened understanding of any culture. For words are its concepts solidified and shaped into a system of communicative symbols for collective understanding, a sociably usable vocabulary, at first oral and then later written down. It's often epitomized as good, just plain old common sense. That said, Merriam-Webster defines opportunity as a good chance for advancement or progress. Now, that fits rather nicely with our concept of the advancing self, which is ideally following an arc of progress while pursuing happiness as an evolving entity within an expanding universe. But as Christ admonished his disciples, be in the world, not of it, which I take to mean that while you're engaged in the world, receiving its impressions and leaving some of your own behind, you are not constituted of it or made of it. What you are constituted of is your intuitive thoughts, feelings, willings, and doing. Identifying with a unique consciousness that can awarefully contribute to the world things virtuous or vile, things that help or hinder. We're accustomed to thinking as a help that comes from the universe, always in positive terms, whether it's a job offer or someone does a kind act for you, or you even get a rebate check or a refund from the tax collector. Well, we often look at those things that come from the universe as opportunities. And we tend to see any hindrance as an opportunity that's been denied, a kind of anti-help, a negative force. But is this true? You can blow the new job your first day on it. You can repay the universe with a harsh word to the next interpersonal encounter you have. And what first appeared a financial opportunity, courtesy of the tax man, could become a way to imprudently spend new money like an old profligate. Clearly, a help, a positive thing come your way, by whatever means, is not a guarantee for progress. It all depends on what's going on in your psyche and how it produces consequences, first internally in your psyche, and then externally in the outer world, such as how you like that new job and whether you perform satisfactorily on it your first week, or how you reverberate the kindness that you received to your next communicant, or perhaps how you actually spend your discretionary income from that tax refund in a prudent fashion. All of that is contingent upon you. And the changeable thoughts, feelings, intentions, and actions in your crucible of momentary consciousness are the primary cause for what you experience internally, as well as the motivating cause for what you do in the world. Further, you are the deciding cause on whatever comes your way, whether a positive help or a negative hindrance. It's all a question of perspective. The ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus once said, people are disturbed not by the happening thing, but by their opinion of the happening of things. Put into other terms, the happening of things, whether apparently a help or a hindrance, is something over which you have little and often no control. The natural causality of the world is indifferent as to how you take it. However, What you do have full control over is the way you take it. Because the way you take it, how you react to an event and interpret it, is probably how you'll make it in the future. That is how you'll continue to construct your actions and reactions into the world. Why is there this predisposition to do what's been done before? Because doing so requires the least amount of energy and exertion. For nature, the law of the conservation of energy finds expression in one of its subvening laws, the law of least resistance, where an energy event series follows a causal path that is already formed, predetermining the causal flow, and therefore not necessitating the expenditure of novel energy that would be required to make a change in energy state. We find that nature executes the law of least resistance by not reinventing new biological formats for each new species informed by its genetic code. For example, preferring to conserve energy not spent on innovation by utilizing the paradigmatic double-stranded helical shape of DNA for encoding genetic information. For us, the law of least resistance is equivalent to expectant, which is the basis of all other forms of self-formation, each being a crystallization of experiences by fixedly anticipating only a repeat of the past. Which is why, as the Spanish philosopher George Santayana said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. He's pointing out that the law of least resistance is a law that extends to the immanent causality in one's own psyche, as well as the collective psyche of societies as historical entities. As a way to conserve energy, we willfully reinforce our already constructed and systematized mental formation so as to prejudge future experiences and save psychic energy. This is the central self-cis formation called expectance, standing as the hub of the other self-cis formation. And of course, I represented that last time when we spoke as expectance being the center, which, if you will, integrates the other cis formations of enslavement of doing and life, enfeeblement of your will, enchantment of your mind, and estrangement of your heart. Essentially, expectance freezes your perspective on yourself and on the world. If you freeze your perspective on the world as a perspectival self, that's that second dimension of self which we've discussed, then you'll see events only as framed by your opinion or mental takes on the world. It's people, events, and things. This is the danger Epicurus warned us of. Opinions are nothing more than mental fixations. They are similar in that way to passions, which are emotive or affective, obsession, and the urges, which are physical addictions and predilections, as well as to commandments, which are compulsions of will. These predilections are all examples of perspectival ossification. They are all ways that your overarching psyche functions to fix all experiential perspectives you might take on the world as confined within the predefined imprints of opinions, passions, urges, and commandments. Like the bed of Procrustes, these perspectival self-disformations will prejudge everything by a severe standard. First tying it to the Procrustean bed of frozen perspective, then stretching or cutting it to fit that bed's invariant length. Since we ourselves could become a Procrustes, recognize your imminent activity of willing, feeling, thinking, and doing have internal consequences in your psyche and yours alone, both short-term and long-term. The continual interpretation of the world according to one's limited and here frozen perspective is no route to personal change, much less self-transformation. When the will is oriented in and to the world by ossified commandments, the psychic imperatives control one to channel one's willpower in a predetermined, inveterate manner, in a non-critical, compulsive, binding, limiting way. Opinions to achieve your fuller purpose and cultivate virtue are closed off before you even choose. That's why it's important to use the orienting phenomena of conscience to guide you toward creatively achieving your highest aim, releasing you from the compulsion to will something that other minds have decided for you, asking only your loyal submission. The one way leads to empowerment, the other to enslavement, a self-disformation. When the mind is confined to opinions, one's current thoughts are merely the mechanical result of whatever mental configurations one has prefabricated beforehand into mental fixations. Opinions are usually fabricated from the dogmatic data indoctrinated during the process of socialization we call education, yielding that culture-bearing being we call a human being. That transmitted data must be sifted through for usable information, refined into adequate knowledge, and eventually cultivated into wisdom, one of the fruits of self-transformation with the enlightened and enlightening mind. That's why it's important for you to employ the noble phenomena of intelligence to examine your life at its varied contents of thoughts, feelings, willings, and doing. The unexamined life, as Socrates noted, is not worth living. Rather than being enchanted with ideas handed down to you, resting content as a true believer, in the terms of Eric Hoffer, one should investigate the meaning, the value, the significance and the truth of any proposition, idea, or belief, clarifying the mind through enlightenment. When the heart and its love are channeled into passions or emotive obsessions, the rich content of feeling is confined to the deep grooves of inveterate desire, where torrents of raging feeling carry one along a well-worn groove of emotion without intervention or redirection. This may carry you downstream along an effective or emotive line of least resistance, but following any well-worn channel isolates you from a good deal of the rest of oceanic reality, especially social reality. This disformational estrangement is due to desire, as Buddha noted over 2,500 years ago. It's the origin of all suffering. That is why it is so important for you to pay attention to the felt phenomena of sension, to purify your heart of attractions and aversions that estrange you from the fuller context in which you live and move and have your being. Cultivating bliss through loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity will transformationally lead to endearment. When life and its doings are imprisoned in the throes of urges, the practical realities of worldly existence are circumscribed to the small local radius of one's demeanor, habits, appetites, and physical addictions. That's why it's crucial to be mindful of the dynamic phenomena of life, which is your sense of livingness and energy for living. Observing where addictions enslave as cyst formations of consciousness, and using these as opportunities to progress into emancipation through the prudent cultivation of skills. Remember, we spoke of that with the 9 types of intelligence and the development of the corresponding skills. Well, in our next session, we'll deal with practical ways to transform obstacles into opportunities by technique for self-transformation. As for now, let's do a concluding exercise for today. And we're going to do something which I've arranged for future exercises as self-transformational evolving practices, or steps for short. So step 1 here, we're going to do the perspective and obstacle analyses, plural, because you're not meant to do all this at once. Do this over a period of time when you feel comfortable in a reflective session where you've got 10, 15, 20 minutes, or even in between programs. Turn something off, give yourself a chance to reflect over the day. And what you're going to ask yourself is, what obstacles have shaped my perspective? And remember, we're looking for the frozen perspective here. So do one of these per self-reflective session. Let's take a look at them. Let me look at one opinion I hold and analyze what it means and how I acquired it. How do I justify holding it? And what does holding this opinion entail? What does and could it lead to as consequences if acted upon? After analyzing it, do I still hold this opinion? In another session, let me look at one commandment holding sway in my life and analyze what purpose it serves and how I acquired it. How does it now guide my life? And what does following this commandment entail? What has and does it lead to as consequences of my enacted commandment? After analyzing it, do I still want to let this commandment direct my sense of purpose in life? In a third session, let me look at one passion I am subject to and analyze what it is and how I acquired it. How does this craving affect my life? Also, what does undergoing this passion entail? What does and has it led to as a consequence of my passionate pursuit? And after analyzing it, do I still want this passion? And in the fourth session, let me look at one urge that moves me and analyze where it comes from and how I acquired it. How do I maintain, regulate, and reinforce it? And what does succumbing to this urge entail? What does and could it lead to as consequences of repeating it? After analyzing it, do I still seek to reinforce this urge? Now, I recommend that if you don't keep a journal of self-transformation, that you write these down in some other workbook of yours. In so doing, you'll have fodder to work on the next time when we get together and we speak of the technique, practical technique for self-transformation.